Okay, so we can start, Marcel. It's up to you now, and have a nice workshop.
Thank you for a nice introduction. So as Nicola said, I'm Marcel. I'm a third-year PhD student in the Prague University of Economics and Business. I'm also now a visiting school at the Reichman University in Israel. I'm also somewhere else, but it doesn't really matter. I'm gonna teach this Oompa Loompas workshop for literature review because this software that I will show today. It's so my dissertation topic is very much linked to the natural language processing, which is a part of machine learning that deals with text. So it's about the representation of text to numbers. This workshop is not about machine learning much or about natural language processing, although the software we will use today uses this technology. But we basically discovered this software. It's very new software. There is a paper about this software called ASReview that we will use today. It was published in Nature, which is a top journal. Nature Machine Intelligence was published this year. I will show the link to the paper. We just discovered it basically randomly because one of our colleagues just saw it somewhere and he forwarded it to me. And it's sort of an emerging software, but we use it very successfully for doing literature review this year with some of my colleagues. So that's why we basically decided to share it with you, because we think you could also benefit. The main goal of this workshop today is to basically speed your literature review and make it more systematic. I'm obviously no expert on literature review. I only wrote one that hopefully will be published sometime soon. But especially in the beginning of my PhD, doing literature reviews can be really a headache. And there doesn't seem to be that much resources around that can help us with it. So even when I asked some of my senior colleagues, they just told me that they keep the knowledge in head and then they just like write about each paper like a short paragraph. But I think we might have found like a better and more systematic ways to do it. This, in the end, this will just use the Excel. This will just take a lot of use of Excel tables, which I will show later. But let's see, how are we gonna proceed? So I made this workshop website on my web, so you can like closely follow after the workshop what you want to do. So you don't have to basically make any notes. So if you click, I send it here to chat. And if you click here on this link, it will redirect you to this website. There is a link to the presentation. It should be working if you click on it. Also, if I change anything in the presentation, it's directly linked online to the presentation to my Google Drive. And let's start with the first annoying thing. Basically, the software we will use today, once it's running, once it's successfully installed, you will see it's very easy to use, very nice, very comfortable and friendly. Sometimes the problem is that it's running inside Python at this point. I believe that this software will very soon become like a standalone application. So you will just get an installation file, will install it, it will be running without any Python needed or just in the background, but it's not in this point yet. So you have to install the Python. I actually expected much more messages, many more emails with ask for technical help than I actually got in the end. So it seemed like at least some of you were successful. It usually sometimes Python installation can be a headache, but there is a way how to overcome is to use the Anaconda Python distribution. So if you go on the website, so the first step is to install this app that we will be using today. And as I'm saying, it's only running in the Python environment, but you can use the instructions I sent you in the invitation. They were the official instructions of ASReview, which, by the way, the ASReview is a software that's being developed at the Utrecht University, which is definitely one of the best universities in Europe. It's in the Netherlands. And so anyway, the solution around this is the Anaconda Python distribution, which usually has a latest stable version of Python, so they don't upgrade it that often, like the regular Python. Someone, I think, wrote also in the chat that the Python version 3.10 is unstable. Doesn't matter, we don't have to care about it now. So if it's not working for you, just click here. Install this entire package. Here it's for the Mac because now I'm on the Mac, otherwise I'm on Windows when I'm at home. After you install it, there will be a new app on your computer. It will be named Anaconda Prompt. It's basically a command prompt, but it's like Anaconda. It's tailored for Anaconda. It's controlling the kernel Anaconda and so on. Doesn't really matter. What can you do is that you start Anaconda prompt after it's installed, and you install ASReview by typing pip install ASReview. This is the package installer for Python. And this you only do once to install it. And then you can just verify that the app is correctly installed by typing ASReview lab into this Anaconda prompt. And that's how it will be running. So I will talk a little bit now about motivation, about doing literature reviews in this software. So if you didn't install, you have the time to do it now, like maybe like 10 or 15 minutes. And then we will talk more about this Prisma and so on. So let me switch to my presentation. So as I already said, doing a systematic literature review can be a headache, especially when you have a large number of papers, your attention is going down, it's very time consuming. We should find some way how to do it, how to be systematic, how not to get lost, how not to get too confused. Fortunately, we have a framework that can guide us through the process of making literature review. This framework is called Prisma. It's not very difficult, very complicated. I will talk about it today. It comprises of 4 stages. One first stage is the identification of papers that we might want to look into. Then we will screen the papers. For this, we will use this ASReview software, as I said. We will only screen the abstracts. After we screen the abstracts in the ASReview, we go to the third Prisma stage, which is deciding from the papers. So in the second stage, we have the papers that we already thought are eligible based on their abstracts. So then we have a set of papers that we think their abstracts is good, and then we are going to like skim through the papers and see whether these papers are really interesting for our literature review. And then we have the final inclusion step, which is the step 4. I will show everything in a diagram in a second. And in the step 4, we will just make like a final list, and we will be extracting the knowledge to the tables when it's possible, and usually it is. So, and what we are going to do today is like going to be very much practical, because I will show it online how to do it and so on. I just want to say that this is not relevant only for when you want to write like systematic literature review papers. So it would be like, I will show you one paper that I wrote last year. This is also very beneficial for scanning the literature and getting domain knowledge about something. So for example, with Nicola, it's her project mainly, but I'm like cooperating on it a little bit. We are trying to do a gender experiment. The thing is that we don't have basically any knowledge on gender experiments. And to do an experiment, you need to have like you need to know a lot of papers that did experiments with gender to be like, not to basically just replicate like what other people did, or to come up with an interesting questions. And we actually, in the sprint, we actually successfully used this ASReview software to scan the literature and come up with new ideas and get a domain knowledge in much shorter time. So basically what we would be doing like 3 weeks, we did in 2 or 3 afternoons. So this is also very useful just if you want to get a domain knowledge about something, you are scanning the new fields, new research and so on. It's not just for writing the research, the literature review paper itself. So that's so much to the motivation. This is the Oompa Loompas are these like small helpers. And in the beginning, just how we came to this title of this presentation. In the beginning, I was like suggesting some horrible names for this presentation, like machine learning aided literature review or active learning aided. And we're like, this is terrible, no one will sign up for it. And we're like, what are these things mean for us? Like, these are like little helpers that help us save time and be more systematic. So that's just to the name. I also think it's really funny and nice, but whatever. This is just to the name. So when I started PhD, I was so lost. I was just like reading papers, and then inside the papers, I saw that there are citations to other papers. And they're like, in every paragraph in the literature review section of every paper, this is very common in management. They have these very heavy, very large literature reviews part. Papers in management also on average tend to be really long, like 50, 60 pages. It's similar in economics, but in management, they really have these like very sophisticated, usually narrative or also systematic literature reviews. What's the difference? Narrative literature review means that you don't need to have any you don't have to like be too much systematic. You just write about everything you want, you make it like a nice story and so on. In the systematic literature review, you should at least stick to some principles. So when I started my PhD and I was like reading these papers, I was so overwhelmed because I didn't know what to do. I was just reading some influential papers, and they always write in these literature reviews in management, like, this has been shown by this Harrison et al. 2019, and also by this 2017. So it seems to, as more you are getting into it, and reading the paper, and then you go to other paper, and then like go to other papers, and just like, yeah, then they're lost in this network of papers, and you don't know what to do. And in the beginning, it was very difficult for me to basically like even keep notes, because I had no system in it. Yeah, I was just trying to write something in a Word document. This is not the way to go. This is like a lost time. Then you get eventually very like disappointed and confused and tired of it, and just stop doing it. So the systematic literature review should be really systematic. And I already outlined these 4 stages that we are going to do today on this sample, on these gender experiments. Actually, we can also do something else. So 4 stages. Here to the right, you already see the outline of what we are going to do. This is called the workflow diagram. That's part of this Prisma framework that I will talk about a little bit later. And this framework consists of 4 stages: identification, so which means that you are searching databases and you are identifying papers and records. And you can also use other sources. So you can also read papers, look for citations, and so on. Then when you identify all the papers that you want to screen, then there is coming this part called screening. In screening, you should do first like preliminary checks, like you should remove the duplicates and so on. But what you do in the screening part is that you just read abstracts and you decide whether these abstracts are relevant for your research question or not, or for the research domain you are looking to, you are exploring. This is very important part, because this can take weeks or even months, depending on the number of abstracts you have to read, because you are also losing attention, so you can't really do it 10 hours a day. And in this part, in the screening part, is when our ASReview software will kick in and will help us to speed this part. So when we screen all the relevant abstracts, here you see that we are already being systematic, because we say how many records we excluded, and we should also provide the reasons, or at least say how many reasons were automatically excluded, which you will see in another workflow. This is what we will do through the automation tools, and how many texts were sent to the other stage. The 3rd stage is called the eligibility assessment, and only the abstracts, only the papers whose abstracts we accept that we found plausible are coming to this eligibility stage. And in this eligibility stage, we will be, so you see that out of 5,500 papers, we only sent 105 full text papers to this 3rd stage. And here it's getting like more serious, because we have to skim through the papers. What do we want is to get the least amount of paper possible to this eligibility stage, so we don't have to read them. And in this eligibility stage, we have to skim through the papers, we have to look at the methods they use. This is very much depending on the context of our research. And then we have to provide, as I'm saying here, we will also provide notes for the rejection, like in an Excel table. If we reject some of the papers, so you will see, we will also provide the description, the basic descriptions of the papers that we accepted. And then we send all these studies that were deemed eligible. We will send them to the last stage, which is I call a final inclusion stage. And in this stage, we will also look into papers more, and we will extract the knowledge from the papers into a table when it's possible, and it's usually possible. So if you want to follow here on the website, so here are the instructions. The link Prisma guides you through 4 stages of your literature review: identification, screening, eligibility assessment, final inclusion. So when you want to try what I'm saying, when you want to catch right, you can just go to the website and go through the instructions here. So what is this Prisma thing exactly? So the Prisma stands for Preferred Reporting Items for Systematic Reviews and Meta-Analysis. And it's a guideline on what to do and how to report items from papers to systematic review. Items are the contents of the papers, like the knowledge, method, results, and so on. What's a meta-analysis? If somebody doesn't know, what's the difference between systematic review and meta-analysis? In systematic review, you are just extracting the knowledge and the results, and you are commenting on it. In meta-analysis, you are synthesizing the knowledge from papers in a qualitative way, because you put it into tables, and you like write about it, you discuss like these people found that, these people found that, there is some contradictory evidence, the future directions are this. Meta-analysis is a quantitative synthesis of results. So it means that you take results, you take estimates from many papers, then you put them in one table, then you compute effect sizes, and you try to estimate, for example, if you have 50 papers that are estimating the same thing. So it could be, for example, my new colleague just made this meta-analysis on the scarcity on dishonest behavior. So he's just taking like all these, it's just what comes to my mind, it's just all these studies that are studying scarcity and the effect on dishonest behavior. So if you have many studies that are studying something same, you can do a meta-analysis. There's also like effect of hunger on dishonest behavior, effect of like of conditions on cheating. Like this would be the experimental things, and other meta-analysis that can be done. For example, you can usually do meta-analysis on something where there are like a lot of papers, there are a lot of estimates. So I was trying to do a meta-analysis on effects of venture capital on company growth. And this meta-analysis you can control for many things. You can control like for country and geography and so on. Yeah, this is not what we will cover today, but it's if you want to do meta-analysis, you should always use Prisma, because in meta-analysis you have to be really systematic to make sure that you are only including the results and estimating the metaregression from results that are really relevant to your research questions, and they have like similar same design and so on. Yeah, there's also a very nice meta-analysis on the effect of resources, geographical resources on GDP and so on. So this is just like inspiration, what can be done. Almost everything can be done. It's difficult. Meta-analysis is very difficult statistically. I'm not very good at it actually. It requires a lot of time to learn it because you have to transform the, but it can be done eventually, but like you have to transform these individual effects, like effect sizes that can be compared with each other and so on. So it's not easy. I will talk a little bit about publication bias today because it's also part of this workshop, of this seminar. But what's good about meta-analysis is that you can sometimes also check for publication bias. Publication bias is a tendency of top journals only publish results that are significant and usually have effects of high magnitude. When we will use this ASReview and the screening part, we will sort of be avoiding the publication bias to some extent, which is good. So back to this Prisma, what it is, it's basically a paper, it's a guideline. The original one was published in 2009. I'm not citing it here anymore because I'm citing the 2020 version that has been updated to reflect new methods and so on. It was designed to help systematic reviewers, so the people who do systematic reviews, to transparently report why the review was done, what the authors did, and what they found. So for example, in papers, it's sometimes surprisingly difficult to understand what the people did, what the researchers did in the papers. So this helps. For example, this Prisma is so standardized, all the reporting of the effects and so on is so standardized that it should be clear for everyone what the original authors did. It has been originally developed and is mostly used for health interventions, study of health interventions, but we can use it for anything else too. I think it's obviously not a miracle, but it's a nice framework that we can work in, and it also does these 4 stages: identification, screening, eligibility assessment, and final inclusion, that I find that help me a lot, for example, in my research. So a good thing about Prisma is that it provides you a guideline how to write your systematic review paper. So there is the 2020 paper, we can just click on it here. It's gonna do something. So here you can see this, I put this section here, get acquainted with Prisma. Prisma guides you through 4 stages of your literature review. Here is a Prisma checklist that I will show. There is a paper with guidelines. There is the diagram I will show. So there is a paper, you can just read it. It's been updated for 2020. There's even the glossary of terms that you should use, because these are the standardized terms. What's the effect estimate? What is the outcome? We are using it in tables that I'm sharing with you already on the website, and I will show you the tables later on. Always stick to these terms. Never come up with your own terms, because this has to be as standardized as possible for other researchers to be able to read it, for it to be reproducible, to avoid any possible confusion and so on. So also in this Prisma framework, we have this workflow that I will also, this is similar to what I already shown. This is how we will proceed. And this workflow, never forget, is when you are doing literature, you will always be completing this workflow. You start with how many records you identified from database, how many databases you use, how many studies, or how many records you remove before screening, then you go to the screening stage and so on. So these are the instructions. And soon we will start work on our literature review. So this is the paper, it has the links. And the nice part of this guideline here is that it comes first with the workflow, but it also comes with a checklist what to do. So let's see. You see here's the checklist here, and it can also be filled online here. So let's see what is the checklist. Checklist that tells you how to write your paper. So first I'm gonna write a title. So identify the report as a systematic review. So let's say that I'm writing a systematic review on, I don't know if to do the gender beliefs now or the venture capital. I guess I know a little bit more about venture capital. So I should tell in the title that the report here means the study, the paper. So I should tell in the title that it's a systematic review. So did we do it? Let's look for my paper, which is like, it's a paper that I did with Shmaranda Pantea. It's now a difficulty of international relations. There is my name here. So did we do it? We said that in the title, this is a literature review on venture capital and growth of young high-tech firms in the EU. So basically it deals with it synthesizes evidence on how receiving venture capital affects growth of young high-tech firms. And the geographic is EU because there are many reviews on US, but not that many on EU. So in the title, we say systematic review of the empirical evidence. So did we say it's a systematic review? We said yes. So here I would write one. And here it's a PDF, so I don't write in it, but for this report, you can also fill it online here. I also included the link. It's a Shiny app in R. So identify the report as a systematic review location where item is reported is one. There is also a checklist how to write your abstract for the systematic review. So identify the report as systematic review, reported, provide explicit statement of this is what you should write in your abstract. Provide an explicit statement of the main objective or questions the review addresses. So here's what we address. Study contributes to the debate on VC-related policies that aim to support the growth of young high-tech firms. Study provides systematic review of the results of 22 firm-level studies that estimate causal effects of venture capital using counterfactual impact evaluation methods and data from 12 EU countries. So when I'm writing the abstract, did I provide explicit statement of the objective? I think I did. Yeah. And so on. You can go and rate your abstract, and this directly tells you how to write a paper. So if you go there, describe the rationale for the review. This is again for not for the abstract, but for the main paper, eligibility criteria. You can just read the paper. I also put there, it's there in the introduction, and so on. This is the literature. This is the part, and so on. This is the overview part, and so on. So you should closely follow this guideline, because this checklist is basically the best thing about this entire Prisma thing, because it tells you what to do. So you would start, you would say the inclusion-exclusion criteria from the review and how the studies were grouped for the sciences. So you would say that you included all the studies in psychology and economics journal that are dealing with this topic of venture capital or gender beliefs if it's that other project. Then you should start with the information sources you use, the search strategy, and so on. We will get back to it as we will be going through our research today. So it's good that you can like click on it here. So and as I said, it can be best described by a workflow diagram. So you should also generate a workflow diagram. It can be found, for example, here. And so on. Where's the generator for it? So it's just gonna see what's the name of the databases is used, data range search, number of citations, how many are excluded, and what's gonna come out of this is this Prisma flow diagram generator. So checklist and diagram generator are your best friends in the literature review process. Yeah. So now we learned something about Prisma. Again, this is how this workflow looks. So it's like you basically summarize your, this is sometimes done like in a paper, usually done in the text part, or people who don't use Prisma, they just like summarize in the text, but I think it's more interesting and easier to read when it's this diagram because you can more like imagine how the things are flowing. You should fill this diagram for any literature you do. There is a note, if you see it here, records excluded, there is this cross note in the screening part, and this is what we will fill. If automation tools were used, indicate how many records were excluded by a human and how many were excluded by automation tools. So our part is a little bit interesting. Our case is a little bit interesting because we will use a software that interacts with a human, but we would say that it's an automation tool. So we would say like this number of records was excluded by the ASReview. And it basically starts with how many studies you found on Scopus or in the database, and it's like how many studies were included in the final review. So as I'm already like hinting, what is this workshop mainly about? Because about Prisma, you can like, it's not that difficult. Screening part is very time consuming. Usually only dozens of papers are relevant for your literature review or your research. So there are like insane amount of papers being published every day, every year on big amount of topics, but the more granular you go, the more focused you go on like specific research questions and specific research topics, you can very often find that not that many papers are actually relevant, but the question is how to find them. So they might not be relevant in the terms of topic, on the terms of research question, or in the terms of methods, because especially in empirical studies, we would very often have set a bar on empirical strategies they use. So it's the econometrical method they would use. We would put like a requirement that, for example, it would have to use counterfactual scenarios in the venture capital, or in the experimental setting, the methods are not usually that economic trick methods are usually not a problem, but the problem is how the beliefs were elicited, or whether it deals directly with beliefs, or whether it's just like some revelation or something. So this is hard to find because it requires a lot of time to just read the abstracts. And obviously, when we are doing the research, when we are learning about new research, we are doing the literature review, we don't know which papers are obviously relevant, otherwise we wouldn't have to be here today. So we have to screen a large number of abstract to identify papers that might be relevant for reading. What could help us? In the past, we would try to make, and I will show it today also, we would try to, when we are searching database, we would try to make clever queries. So it's like what you write in the, it's like this code, this very simple code that you would write into the database, the papers database, and to like try to basically limit this set of papers, overlapping set of papers that we are interested in to the minimum, so we don't have to read that many papers. From my experience, this never really worked too well, because even the terms within one field tend to diverge. Even in one field, it's easy to miss some papers. It's not that easy. Fortunately, now we have machine learning and natural language processing, so it help us a little bit in this screening part. And that's what people basically do. So, for example, this is a code. This is a query for Scopus. This is just the search query to find abstracts that we are interested in. This is what I wrote like a year ago, where I didn't know about ASReview, and I don't think it was even like released publicly. So this is what you would do before. It didn't work too well. So you would have like this together. I just like wrote it in Python, and I just like put the strings together, and I search it in Scopus programmatically. This entire thing is one query. The titles that are not used, but it's like, so I'm looking for the treatment of venture capital, VC investment, VC investor, VC fund, blah, 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 blah. And at the same time, the paper has to mention, so the paper has to mention one of these treatments, and at the same time, it has to mention one of these countries. And you can already see the problems here, because some papers would report United Kingdom as Great Britain, some would say United Kingdom, some would say UK. Yes, and this is our operator, so it's like it has to mention at least one of these countries, then the firm characteristics, then the outcome variables, and the methods they use. So you like try to come up with this super complex query. These also, some people say it's not difference in differences, they say it's difference in difference. You can sometimes control for it with this asterisk operator. So yeah, so this means that it can, in the paper, it can be either Austria, there can be a search word Austria or Austrian. But it obviously doesn't work, because Austrian, like adjective, is just N plus, so the asterisk would work. But obviously Italian startup, this wouldn't work, because it's changing the end letter. Belgium, and so on. Latvian would work. So you see how much headache it is. And I wrote all this code, and it wasn't like, we were able to identify a lot of papers, but we also missed a lot of papers in the end. So when we were like in this eligibility assessment part, and we were reading the papers that came out from this code, we actually found out that there were like at least like 6 or 10 other papers that were highly relevant, but we didn't find them because this code is not perfect. So now we have the machine learning, which basically only requires us to do a very broad search with very limited, very basic and very simple search query. And then we will have this natural language processing to look for the similar papers that are similar to what we like. I will show you how the software knows what we like, because we will click on the heart or the cross, like I love it or I don't love it, I don't like it, this abstract. And this is how this algorithm that is working behind this ASReview, how it's learning, it's literally learning in the real time, it's training itself to know what we are interested in or not. So today we will show how to overcome this crazy headache of these long queries. Yeah. So when I'm talking about machine learning, this workshop is not about machine learning, but just like to have this conceptual idea. How can machine learning help us in this process? It's not gonna extract the knowledge from us to the table. So it's not, although this might be, there is a knowledge extraction, information extraction research. It's also mainly done by Google in machine learning. And there are some, it's very much using language processing, just like trying to extract the knowledge, also using something that we call name entity recognition, whatever. This is future. This is not now, but it will happen. But it's not good what's gonna do for it now, this software. It's also not gonna write a paper for us. It's if I can have, we have time, so if I can have just one short comment on this. There's this great researcher, Tomáš Mikolov, who is Czech. He like basically started the field of natural language processing using machine learning. And I saw an interview basically with him like a few days ago. He was saying like this whole, because sometimes in business setting, machine learning is called AI, artificial intelligence. It's not artificial intelligence. Machine learning is like smarter statistics that's learning on the data, it's finding the patterns and so on. And he had one interesting prediction, is that we don't know whether we can really ever create any sort of artificial intelligence, so the machine that would be able to basically think on its own. But what we are getting close to is that we will get machine learning algorithms that will be able to imitate the style. So they will not, so you will write something, you will write your literature review, you will write a paper. So you still have to like, the information extraction and knowledge extraction is still in the beginnings, but the style thing is like getting advances. So basically you are gonna write a paper, and then you was like, oh, I wanna send this paper to American Economic Review. And it seems like as we are now trying to sell our papers, like in these top journals, it seems that one of the things that sells the paper a lot is the style, is to imitate is that the style of your writing is similar to what's being published in the journal. So what do you do now? So what do researchers do now? The academics, they just like read, I don't know, like American Economic Review or Management Science journal. They read the papers there and they see which style is how the paper's written. And then they try to imitate the style when they are sending the paper there. And it's also this reasoning and so on. So this we will soon be able to imitate. So you will basically train a machine learning algorithm on all the papers that were published in American Economic Review in the last 20 years. So you will train the model on it, and then you will it will learn the patterns like the word use, the style, and so on, and how the results are reported and so on. And then you will input your own paper that's, especially if you have PhD student, is probably not on the American Economic Review level. It will take as an input your paper, and it will imitate the style. It will rewrite it in the style of American Economic Review, while it will be keeping the facts that you wrote. It will just be like changing the style of the text and so on. So this we are getting close to, but we are not there yet. Or you could be able to, in the future, you will be able to imitate the style of like of some writer and so on. So this is definitely interesting. This is not what we're gonna do today. We are gonna use machine learning to help us in the screening phase, as I already said a few times. And what is machine learning? Just to finish this, it's the methods. To put it very easily, machine learning are basically methods and models, statistical models that can automatically learn, find, explore, estimate rules between target and feature when only these two are provided and no rule is provided. So it basically learns, in other words, it can find patterns in the data. Target is also called an econometric dependent variable, and feature is called independent variable. So this is machine learning. And it learns, so what will be this target will be whether we like the abstract and not, and the features are what is written in the abstract, and it's going to be learning actively on this. And then to illustrate this better, what would be the example of a pattern in literature review? So if you look at my Scopus about what I read, so if you look at the history of articles I read, and could if I train a machine learning model on my Scopus, so it can look at the history of articles I read and could recommend me new articles than what I read in the most in the past. So when it learns, it would learn on my past behavior. It would see what I like. It can be proxy, for example, like what I open at all, or what I spend most time on reading on papers that are talking. So what I like are papers about machine learning, natural language processing, human behavior, gender associations, because I have some research on it using natural language processing also. I like this research about top managers, personality, indices, and upper echelon theory, and some more. At the same time, I never learn anything about, I never read anything about material science, aerospace engineering, or, for example, knitting. So what the model does is that what would classic machine learning model do? It would like read, process, it would learn on my past behavior, and then I would give it like new articles or other articles I never read, and it would just like read them, and it would estimate the articles I didn't read yet, and it would recommend me, it would estimate the probability that I will like the article based on what I learned in the future, what I read in the future. So usually done in terms of probability, it's a like simple classifier. This is also called in business, I think, a recommender system. Also, I guess in science, I think it's a recommender system. So we are already getting closer to what this ASReview is doing. So this is what I'm saying is no sci-fi. This is happening, for example, on Google Scholar. I was very happy to see it. Let's see. Google Scholar. So some of my my presentations or something that's on my Google Scholar is about estimating heterogeneous treatment effects with machine learning and so on. You see, these are recommendations based on your Scholar profile and alerts. And what I'm already getting here is that the recommended article for me based on what I write about and what I read about is the efficient estimation in these models, which are neural network-based estimators. Yeah, show all recommendations. Yeah, I only got one at this point because I don't have that many papers. And so this is already happening. So this is no sci-fi. But the problem is that this machine learning, this type of machine learning is looking at what I already did, what I like, what I read about. So it's recommending me the papers that I might not have read before, but it's already like something that I like. But the problem with literature review is that sometimes I don't know what I like, or I don't know what I'm looking for. So we need something that's like a little bit more interactive than this machine learning on the past data. Yeah, so the potential problem is we don't know when we are doing literature review, we very often don't know what we are looking for because we are exploring doing new research. So if we knew exactly what we want, so we wouldn't have to do all these steps that we will be doing today. So when we don't know what we are looking for, we are exploring a research domain. Classic machine learning might not be that helpful because it might tell us what we like in the future, in the past and so on, but we need something reactive, more reactive, and that learns more adaptively. Fortunately, there is a subdomain on machine learning that's called active learning, and that's gonna do everything we want. Active learning is a subfield of machine learning, which like where human actually interacts with machine learning algorithm. Active learning is a special case of machine learning where the algorithm interacts with the user to get or query him, to get him queried to label new data. So it basically asks you, what is this? Do you like it or not? Is this relevant or not? And you say yes or no. And based on the response you provide, or is this apple or not? Is this banana or not? And based on the response you provide, it's learning itself. It's interactive and it's updating its, I mean, in this sense, I could even say it's updating its beliefs, it's updating its model and estimations. So the software you'll be using today, ASReview, is a prime example of active learning. Every time you will write an abstract, which we will get to soon, it updates its knowledge about what you might be interested in and reshuffles your workload. So basically, to give like a bigger picture how this software works is that you download 2,000 papers, 2,000 abstracts, and normally if you say that like you have 100 papers are actually relevant, so that would be 5% of the total sample. These 100 papers would basically be distributed randomly in these 2,000 abstracts. So you would have to read all 2,000 abstracts. So if you want to do a meta-analysis, maybe you can dedicate a few weeks reading it. If you just want to learn about something new, you can use something faster, and we will be using it, this ASReview. So these 50 papers, these 100 papers would be distributed randomly in this workload. So you have to learn all the abstracts. What this ASReview does is that loads the abstracts. It shows you, do you like this? Do you like it? No. And based on what you say no or yes, it's updating, it's learning what you might be interested in, and it reshuffles your workload. So it puts the most relevant papers to the front of your workload. So it means that the 100 most relevant papers will hopefully be in the first 200 abstracts you review. And then if you are getting relevant abstracts, like more and more, if you get 20, 30 relevant abstracts, you are almost sure that you can be almost sure that this is finished, that there are no other relevant abstracts in the workload anyway. So we will see it in action soon. It really lands after every abstract decision. So to see that this is not some obscure tool, even though I hate that it's not a standalone app yet, but the truth that it's working is that it's been peer-reviewed and published in Nature Human Intelligence this year, which is obviously a top journal because it's Nature. It's not Nature, but it's like this derivative of Nature. So you can read this paper. What I will talk about a little bit today too is that this is completely reproducible. You will get the logs, you will get a project that you will export from this ASReview. So everyone who just loads the project can completely reproduce what you did. This might not sound that important, but it's actually very important because based on the studies you include in your systematic review, because from these studies you are writing the paper and you are like bringing the evidence. So for example, if you only go for top journals that might have a high publication bias, or you only choose the journals that tend to publish one kind of results in the same domain, let's say, you can come up with the reasoning that venture capital is super effective. Or if you go for some other stream of literature, you can find out that venture capital is not effective at all, because it depends where it was done and which journal it was published and so on. So like if you don't include these kind of studies in your literature, you might come to different conclusions, and you shouldn't, because the only real conclusion is that there is a stream of studies that say there is effect. The other study says there is no effect. The studies that say there is a big effect are predominantly using US samples. The studies that say there is no effect are using European samples, and especially the studies that say there is very high effect are not using counterfactual strategies. This counterfactual mean that we are simulating like the experiments in empirical settings. So you have, for example, you don't know in the venture capital, you don't know you can't observe, you are either observe a firm, one firm you observe in only one of these states, like the state where she got the VC or when the firm didn't get the venture capital. And you can't observe the same firm in two states simultaneously. So you have to use these counterfactual strategies. So for example, the studies that use these counterfactual strategies, which is obviously the state of the art, like difference and differences, the regression discontinuity, the state of the art would be probably the control, probably I don't know how to say, yeah. The methods that are using these like counterfactual strategies, the studies that are using it are basically reporting much lower effects than if you just like run basically linear regression, because these counterfactual strategies can tell you, can report on what would happen if they wouldn't get the venture capital and so on. And this is everything should be in this literature review. So that's why the literature review should be efficient and also very much transparent. And that's why we should use this ASReview, because it's completely reproducible. So for example, I am trained in economics. That's my training. When I do mostly these data science things now, but my PhD is like technical in management, I guess. And I don't know much about management, to be honest, but what I hate about literature reviews being done in the field of management is that they just write, this is a very nice narrative review, but it was published in, yes, it was published in the academy. This is a paper from last year, already getting a lot of citations. Oh, in Journal of Management, so it's a super top journal in management. So they have like this like narrative review, but they say it's a systematic reviews. He was a PhD student and not UPenn, but Penn State. I talked to this guy, this Brett Neal, a little bit. So what they did in this review, and this is very common in management, is that they don't search for anything basically. They just like take these 5 or 10 top journals in management, and they just like look for the last, for the papers that have been published the last 10 years. And they say like, oh, are these papers like related to his upper echelon theory or not? And if they find yes, then they just like include them. So it's like hand picking the papers they like from the top management journals. And it's obviously a problem because there is obviously a correlation between quality and the ranking of the journal, but there are also many other things. So for example, if you are a senior US academic, you have much higher chance to have your paper published in academic, what's it called, this Academy of Management review and so on. So you can get very biased results if you only include these top journals. And we will be avoiding this using this ASReview, as I will show in a minute. But this is not the way to go, basically. That's what I'm trying to say. What they did here, the studies they included, it's not reproducible. There is another paper, Making CEO Narcissism. It's also published last year, and I think it was published in Academy of Management Review, I guess. Also in the Journal of Management, like 5-year impact factor 16.7. And this is also like narrative and it's styled and so on. It's published in the end of 2019, but this is real systematic review. If you are going to read this paper, it's great. They are also trying to do some sort of meta-analysis, but often they don't really have, because the empirical methods are for now not that widespread in management. I hope they will be in the future, but they couldn't find that many studies, which obviously bias the results, but at least they were like systematic. And it's the same journal, 2 papers, same discipline, same theory, because the upper echelon theory and narcissism are very similar theories, and some would even say they are the same. And this is like completely different paper. So I encourage you to read this one. Yeah. For example, in that one, in this one differed by the Neely, these meta verdicts, they would just provide, in the end, they wouldn't provide a table of papers they review. They would just provide like, we screen these 10 top journals. Yeah. So don't do that. We have to be systematic. And yeah. And this ASReview is like this active learning idea. It learns after every abstract decision. We will see it in action soon. So I took these pictures from this ASReview website. No, not yet. This is this ASReview, like to join the movement towards fast, open, and transparent systematic reviews. So I would say that they should make the standalone app first and not force people to. Why we are doing this workshop is because we think that it's the best cost-benefit analysis tell us that the benefits of using this software is still better than the cost of like having his headache with Python. And once you install it, when it's working in Python, it's going to work like for, I wouldn't say forever, but for a long time, unless there is some problem with version of pandas or something. But yeah. It has been experimentally shown, so if you are going to read this paper, which you can, this one, I included the link. It has been experimentally shown to decrease the reviewing time by over 90% on most applications. This is obviously if you are working in a very niche field. For example, economics of crime is a very niche field that I don't do anymore anyway. There are not many papers published, so you don't need ASReview, but most of us work in fields where like many papers are published in the theories or like on the topics we are interested in. So we can definitely benefit from decreasing the screening time. And we are gonna start working in it soon. Just note two things. When we start with the reviewing, you will only see title and abstract. Why? I will comment on it in a second. And the other thing is you decide when to stop reviewing. We usually stop, our like rule of thumb is to stop after we have 20 or 30 relevant abstracts. Then we would basically stop reviewing. So just before we start this, because one of my colleagues, he actually wrote to these developers of this app, and he said like, why don't you show from which year this publication is, or from which journal it is? And they wrote back, actually we want to eliminate the bias that you are getting when you see the publication or the authors. Maybe you know them, like they are like senior scholars, or what's the quality of the journal and so on. So we basically, you should be able to only make the decision on the abstract and title itself, the decision to either send it to the after to the eligibility assessment phase or not. So as I'm saying, the reason why we will only see the title and abstract is a bias. There are like numerous biases you can be influenced by. They're usually like subconscious. There's also a publication bias. And we might be, for example, this is my experience, right? We might be primed to rate abstracts more relevant when there are like famous authors, famous journal, English sounded names, and so on. So for example, when I did this literature review a year ago and I didn't know about ASReview and wasn't really functioning yet, it wasn't out there yet, I was just like, when I was getting really tired in the evening, I have to admit, I was just like, it took a lot of time. I screened like 300 abstracts, and it was taking a lot of time. And because you want to be diligent, and I was like, oh, this is just this, I don't know, Indian journal, like I never heard about, so maybe it's not that interesting. So you would still read it, but you would like put less attention on it and so on. So we shouldn't get any of these contextual informations, and we will want them. So I would say it's already like even if you are just gonna rate, even if you would rate all the abstracts in the app, I think it's still better to get rid of the bias this way, because you will not see the journals or the, like, obviously if it's an article I don't know, authored by Gary Becker, you would always include it. But if you don't know the author, maybe you will not include it, or some other famous authors and so on. Yeah, so the only text of the abstract itself and the title should matter for your decision. Now, I was under influence of many biases when I was screening abstracts manually before ASReview, because it was like never-ending work. It was just so annoying. And something, just to finish this publication bias thingy, special type of bias concerning the papers is publication bias. Top journals in virtually all fields are much more likely to publish studies that report significant results. And usually these significant results have, if you would only search in top journals, you might seriously, and this is like, let's just stop at this, because what I told you before about this Brett Neely, I talked to him, he's nice and so on, but what they did is that they looked to the top journals. And if you look at the top journals, it's not even if you are from Harvard or Yale, blah, 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 but it's also about what your study says. And if your study finds very strong and significant effects that are reported in your study, this has much higher chance to be actually published in a top journal. So if you only look for your literature review to the journals that are top, you will only find the you will only find the very significant effects high in magnitude, and this will completely bias your review, because if you go to, so it's like first quartile, first decile journals, if you go to like second quartile journals, you will find that many studies don't report that many effects, or third quartile journals. But the reason, and some people think, oh, they didn't find the effects because they like had a bad method, or they had bad data, or they are bad scientists. But it can also be the case that just the effect is not there. And this is a huge problem. And this is, I really want to stress the idea that we should search in all journals. Like, we shouldn't limit ourselves to, I mean, maybe you can, I would dare to say that maybe you can like omit the fourth quartile, but you should definitely search in first, second, and third quartile compared to when we are like using this article influence score. And I would even say go even for the fourth quartile, because there might be studies that are published there that like are methodologically correct, which you will be able to assess when you read them most of the time. But just search in all the journals, because if you only search in top journals, you will completely bias upwards your reports. You will say there is an extreme effect. It's like this, there is this thing with this honesty. There's a working group on it here in Prague, and sometimes they don't find any effects, but I know that it's very hard for them to get the papers into journals if they don't find these dishonesty effects, like that something does effect on dishonest behavior. There is this then Ariel scandal now, if you heard about it. Yeah. So yeah, basically that's it. So my message is search in all journals. Obviously, if you go for papers that are published in lower quality journals, they will not be that nice to read. It will usually require more effort, but you might find interesting estimates that might report, for example, lower effects. And it's especially very important for the quality of your work. We discussed it with one of my colleagues actually here, that publication bias is a huge thing. It was a huge thing when I started my studies, which was like 9 years ago. And it was like, people are talking about it, and it's still the case. And some of these journals now, my colleague told me, have this like statement like, we accept null results, we welcome null results, like zero result, like zero effects. When you make a study and you find there are no effects of I don't know, hunger on cheating, or on the self-selection, this other study of my supervisor that actually found zero effects. The study of if you can self-select the environment where you will cheat, and they found zero effects. This is very hard to sell, because like it's hard to publish it in high journals, but it's also like very reliable and robust result. Yeah. So and they say in these top journals, they say like, we are aware of publication bias, we are aware of it, and we encourage you to, if the study is methodologically correct, we encourage you to submit the null and zero results to us, and we will publish it if it's good. They don't publish it. Like, long story short, they don't publish it. If you look into journals, like just go like, I don't know, Leadership Quarterly, Academic, and empirical journals, management side, they don't publish it. They say they publish it, they don't publish it. Just like you don't get through. It's still very much widespread. And with this ASReview, we can to some point we can get ourselves blind to many biases. We can debias ourselves with this basically simple, I wouldn't say it's nudge, it's like the environment where we don't see these, we are not that reactive. Our biases don't get triggered, I would say. Yeah. So let's work in this.
Yeah,
so
maybe Marcel, a short break would be nice.
Is it already 90 minutes? It's 1 hour. Okay.
Maybe before the big part, because it's kind of.
Okay, let's have a break.
Late.
And after let's have 10 minutes break. I'm gonna have a coffee, and afterwards we will start working. Okay. So see you in 10 minutes. I'm just reading the chat because I can't follow it up when I'm presenting because I don't have two screens, but I like the comments here. I like this research from Ivana that it's more diverse, and it's really true that like the journals that the top journals tends to be like there is this often, especially in economics, there is like this insane amount of gatekeeping. So under the theories that like are compliant with what the top people in the field say are getting through and so on. So this is definitely very interesting. Yeah, and a lot of top journals don't publish a diverse research at all. Yeah, that's for sure. So I like the yeah.
Once my supervisor said if I miss one top journal or top author, they won't even accept your journal, your paper in a journal.
Yeah.
He missed one of the top kind of citation, and then he said, "Oh, you missed this one. We're not going to publish it." So it's very, very biased in that sense that they only want to have the set out names, and you can't do anything new without quoting the research basically.
Well, when we were talking about, we were talking about imitating style of the journal. So I learned from some people who are sort of successful in publishing. They just told me that it's odd to imitate the style of the journal, that now they need to use citations.
Yeah.
They need to tailor citations when they are sending paper to specific journal. They need to tailor the citations and what they are saying to that specific journal. They look what this journal publishes and which theories they like and they don't, and then they tailor the citations to signals. Hey, we want to get in, but we agree with everything you say, which is insane. Yeah.
And you also mimic the way you write in those journals to actually accept you as well.
Yeah, it's really, yeah, it's a big game. So anyway, we have time, and we should get back as our break is over. Christian, the meta-analysis about the scarcity and unethical behavior is the work of Christian Elbaek, who is a PhD student, PhD candidate at the Aarhus University in Denmark, which is basically one of the best schools in economics in the world, as far as I know. And just to finish our publication bias, because I think this is important and this is something we will have to do in the future. So I would like to invite Christian to, when you do meta-analysis, you can check for the publication bias to some extent. And I would like to invite Christian, who I'm just met in the hall for coffee, whether he can tell us a little bit about how he checked, because Christian is a real expert on meta-analysis, and this is a prime work. This is an amazing work, and I would like to invite him to tell us just a little bit about how we can check for publication bias in research, basically, in publications.
Yeah. Thanks, Marcel. Thanks. So we did this meta-analysis, which I just sent in the chat. And as Marcel has mentioned now a couple of times, publication bias is a detrimental thing in research because, for instance, when you do a meta-analysis, this can severely distort basically the entire result, which is why people have begun assessing how much publication bias we can expect to be in a certain field, whether it's management or whether it's this very little subfield, which I did a meta-analysis in. And usually these classical methods, you might have seen these funnel plot asymmetries where people assess whether basically small studies have systematically larger point estimates than these larger studies should have, and whether these studies would then be basically inflating the estimates. And this is a fair way to do it, but we've also seen that even these publication bias methods can severely distort the results that we get in the end, and they might not be as good as we expect them to be. So in this meta-analysis specifically, we used a completely new method, which is, I think it was published in 2019 or 20 or something like that, which is a much easier way basically, and comes without a lot of assumptions from before, where you basically just assess to what degree publication bias should exist within a specific field to shift your meta-analysis estimate to 0. And this is a very intuitive way of assessing publication bias, basically, because you look at what kind of point estimates are we seeing, what kind of p-values are we seeing in this specific research, and to what degree can we say that this is sensitive to the specific field that we are in right now. So it becomes much more of an intuitive estimation. And if Marcel can find it now, I can. It's a very long paper, this one, so. But it creates a very nice graph. Marcel, I don't know what page it's on. It's probably later down beneath the results somewhere.
It's the metaregression, right? This is the metaregression.
This is the main meta-analysis results. But if you roll further down, you should be able to find this little nifty graph. This one. So these are the studies that are basically. All of the dark gray dots are the studies that are affirmative of the theory, the significant estimates, while the non-affirmatives are the ones that are not significant. And as you can see in this specific line of research, we found that there was actually quite a fair distribution of published findings which reported non-significant results. So this is a really good indication that there might not be a lot of publication bias in this specific field. But if we were to see that a lot of these estimates were to the right of the line instead, we could argue that there was going to be more publication bias in the field, basically, that there would be more studies published only because they were reporting significant results. And if you roll a little bit further down, Marcel, in this document, we also use this. I don't know if you know of this P curve, which shows how many of the reported studies. So now we're only looking at the significant studies. How many of the included studies reported a p-value that was either like below 0.01, 0.02, 0.03, 0.04, or 0.05. So if this P curve were to have like an incline right at the 0.05 value, this would indicate that a lot of these published findings were only reporting p-values of 0.05, which could indicate that there would be like significant file draw problems in the meta-analysis or in the literature in general, right? So this is another way of assessing whether there's, for instance, data mining or p-hacking in the literature. So yeah, this was just a few words on that. It's very important to assess this. It's extremely difficult because you need to have all of the data from the meta-analysis in the beginning first, and that's really what takes the time. And I would have loved to maybe have this kind of tool that Marcel is presenting in a minute before I did my meta-analysis, because it took a ton of time. And what is really taking the time in a meta-analysis is to actually code all of these studies, reach out to scholars who have not reported their studies in the right way, or so on. So all of these 2,000 studies that we went through, everything was done by hand. There was no automation, unfortunately. So this could have been a lot easier. So if I'm gonna do another one in the future, I would definitely use Marcel's tool instead. Yeah, that's my 5 cents.
Thank you so much, Chris. Yeah, Chris also used this Prisma diagram here. He has 4 stages: identification, screening, eligibility, inclusion. And I think it's finally the time that we are actually gonna see the two. I'm promising you all the time here. So let's start working. Thank you. So we are gonna get here. So to screen the abstract, we first have to identify the papers and their abstracts that we are actually interested in. Let me just put down all these videos. So what basically we are going to do now is that we are going to search for all the relevant literature in Scopus and Web of Science. And hide floating controls. Good. And we are going to do this, like, we have to do some examples. So we are going to do this experimental evidence on gender beliefs, because that's what the experiment of Nicola is on. And like, I just didn't know anything, any studies basically. So we were like really exploring which studies are there, and there are like many. So it would like take us such a long time to really look for it. So we use this ASReview for these gender beliefs. We have I had no domain knowledge, only know about 4 or 5 studies, and we obviously don't want to do it on something you don't know. That was already done. So what to do? Let's search Scopus and use ASReviews to help us find what we are really interested in. And this is where we are basically starting. So let's search Scopus. That's what we start with. Scopus search. Yeah. So this, what we did before, we are not going to do again. These crazy queries, we are not going to do. We are going to be broad. We're just going to let us inspire. We can have, because we have this tool that will help us speed the screening of abstracts, we can download 2,000 articles. Actually, we can only download 2,000 results from Scopus. We can only export 2,000 results, that's the limit. And from the Web of Science, 50 results is the limit at this point. It can be more if we do it programmatically in Python, but we are not going to do it here. So I would recommend that we do Scopus now. So normally you would get crazy if you were like, oh my God, I will have to read 1,800 abstracts. It's not a problem anymore. So let's log into the Scopus. I'm already logged in. You have to do this. Let me show you. How to log in there. So sign in. You have to do this. There is this sign via institution. Sign via institution. Here I have to write Prague University. Some business. What's that gonna be? Some annoying redirect to the university website, but it's working, which is good. Login. So what I'm gonna do, this is searching Scopus. Don't worry here. I have this access through the University of Vienna because I usually use it because it's they subscribe more journals than we do in Prague, but it works for Prague. I tried it yesterday too. It's fine. And this is how we are searching the document. So here you this is the basic search. So you would search within either all fields. So if you write gender all fields, it would look for the term for the search for gender in entire text. So there are 2,177 articles that mention the word gender in the entire text of the article. So you see here, we will be working a little bit with these keywords, with these queries. So all gender means that it's all entire the article. We don't want this because we will not get anywhere. We want to search an article. If we are looking for something specifically, we can reasonably expect that it's going to be an article title. The mention of the word is going to be an article title, abstract, or keywords. So if I'm interested in gender beliefs and experiments, gender beliefs, experiments. This is just the keywords. It only, this query tells me, this is good. It's not difficult to read it. But it tells me that in the title, abstract, or keys, you should have gender and beliefs and experiments. So this word should be there. I should also use an asterisk. So it's experiment, experimental, experiments. Everything that comes after this is included in this search term. I can also do this beliefs, belief, gender belief, experiment. Yeah, it's because I included this asterisk there. So it also meant because if I only say experiment and an abstract, it will be there won't be we did experiment, but there will be we have experimental evidence. It wouldn't be shown up in the previous query, without asterisks, because it's a different word, but it's not really a different word. So I can use the asterisk to control for it. And this is basically it, how you search in Scopus, right? It's pretty easy actually. Compared to this, for example, right? This is difficult. This is easy. And let's be broad, as long as it doesn't reach, as long as the search result doesn't reach 2,000, so we can export it, it's fine. So you can play with it, you can add the search field, and this is this operator, or, so it should be either gender belief experiment. So if you say that I'm looking either for gender experimental evidence in gender beliefs, or I'm looking for explainable AI, so it will give me articles on both, or again, just like joking right now because it's not really related, but it could be like, or gender, not beliefs, but it could be empirical if I'm looking for empirical studies, empirics and so on. So you can just play with this, it's fun. What I use usually is this advanced document search, and it's using this like, basically when you use this basic document search, it gives you the query that you query the database with, it gives you here. When you, before you download, when we will download, we will like export these abstracts here. Before you export the papers, just click here and copy it and put it to some notes or put it to some words. So you can, in your literature review, then you can say, we found, we retrieved in the Prisma, you would say we retrieved all the articles using this query, right? So in the checklist, you would write, what would you write? Specify, present the full search strategies for all databases, registers, and websites, including any filters and limits used. So here you would write, this is the query we used. Okay, be broad. We don't have to like limit it anymore because we don't have to, we can download 1,364 papers, but we don't have to read them all because we will use the ASReview. So this is just something you can play. I think many of you know it, like it's not that interesting. Yeah, I usually use these advanced queries. If you want to learn about it, there are these search tips here. Yeah, like these operators, and or it explains to you what does it mean. You can play with it. It's fun. Don't be, just my only message here is just like, don't make it too complicated. Don't make this. Make it broad. Like, also think about, because as I'm saying, like this, as I'm saying, there are these like terms tend to diverge. So the belief, like this usudek, this judgment you have about someone, this is a term that's mostly used in economics, I would say. It's not that much like used in psychology, because in psychology you would use a stereotype. So here you would, for example, say to control that, like if you know that the terms tend to diverge and you know both the terms, then you would say or either belief or stereotype. Like put the brackets here and so on. So just like make sure to control for this when the terms tend to diverge, and this would usually happen. Yeah, you see, I get, if I say belief or stereotype. So if I say belief and stereotype, it means that the abstract has to include both belief and stereotype, which wouldn't make sense. But if I say it has to be one of these, at least one of these, then I get so many documents more. But I'm literally, in this case, I'm literally only interested in beliefs, literature that lives. This is conceptually, I'm only interested in beliefs because it has a specific meaning and so on. So just keep this in mind, that it tends to diverge. Usually terms like we use to describe, we describe some things, but the terms we use to conceptualize it and describe are definitely diverge, like are different among disciplines like psychology, economics, business, management. But sometimes they're even like when you have like this different school of tradition, it also tends to be different. So just keep this in mind when you are searching for it. It's better to have more papers than less. Yeah, so I like this one. I like this gender and belief and experiment. So I just search for it, right? I can control it a little bit here. I can say social sciences, psychology. This is like, this is fine. If it's reasonable, you can like, you are not interested in gender experiments in nursing. So like, you don't have to click on it. Arts and humanities, I would click on social sciences, psychology, business and management, biochemistry, not. Economics, econometrics and finance, definitely yes. Computer science, neuroscience. Depends on what's relevant. So now I can limit it. And I end up with 967 documents. So when you have this final query, just copy it and put it, just like have like a Word document or some notebook where you can like copy paste all these, like how we are going through this Prisma framework. And yeah, that's it. So just like copy paste this somewhere. And now we can finally go to this magical tool that I'm talking about already for 90 minutes. So we have to export Scopus. Now it wasn't the case before, but now in Scopus you can actually, these are the papers that we're interested in. Lower variability in female students than male students at multiple time scales. Gender differences in motivated reasoning. Oh my God, it's a new paper. Nicola, you have to read this paper. It's a new paper by, is it Richard Thaler? Or it's someone else. Oh, it's Michael Thaler, but he's from Princeton. So you see, I'm already falling for these biases. Like, he's from Princeton, so it must be a good paper. It's this J-Boy, Journal of Economic Behavior and Organization, because this paper wasn't published in spring. This sounds interesting. Okay, so I click all, and I export all these papers to one of these. I can't export it to CSV because, as far as I know, it either doesn't include abstracts, or the ASReview that we will use doesn't work with it. So I have to export this search. I want to export 967 abstracts. I have to export them in one of the formats it's that ASReview can read. It can read most of these citation formats, so I can use this BibTeX or this RIS format. It doesn't really matter. I need abstract, that's for sure, because it's what I will learn, like export. Already exported. Sometimes you can download the papers, but you need a Chrome or Mozilla, and I am on a Mac, so I'm on Safari. It doesn't work that well. I tried it. It like only downloads some of the papers, I think. I'm not sure. You will have to try it, but we don't need it at this point, because the final paper, the final number of papers that we will have will be like 50, 60 most likely out of 967, like from experience. So you can like download manually 50 papers. Is this okay? This is downloaded. So Scopus. You have, by the way, you have access to this. You don't have an access to the folder, but it's linked. The website thingy is linked to these things. Is it here? It's here. Good. So what do I do now? I open this Prisma generator. And I will fill in the things in checklist, how many studies I included. Date range searched is, I think it's 1980 to 2021. I think that's, you would have to look for from which year it's which year it's being excluded. 1898. Okay, that's probably not very relevant. We can say 1898 because the first paper is 1898. Number of citations, 967. It's non-duplicate because it's coming from, and you can go on and so on. And now we are gonna go to the second step. So you fill the appropriate part of Prisma checklist and workflow. After this step, you export your search, and now we are gonna go to the screening part, which is the main, basically part of this workshop. And yep, let's do it. So what would you write here? Specify databases, so we search Scopus. Present the full strategy, so we put the query there that we copied. Specify the method. Yeah, this is not what we do because we are doing it automatically. Yeah. List and define all data items. List and define all outcomes for which data were solved. So you would say that like they were like, yeah, 967 studies. And let's study ASReview finally. So we are in the step 2, screening. We are gonna be, so we have 967 abstracts to screen, to go through. And so we started, so now we go to this tool finally, this ASReview. So I'm on Mac, so I'm just gonna start the terminal, oh, it's already running actually. Interesting. So I was trying it before. Sometimes with Python, you never know when there is an update. So this is my terminal. I write ASReview. Before I write this, if you are on Windows and you are following this Anaconda Python distribution, just click on Anaconda prompt and write ASReview lab. And if you were installing Anaconda Python and there's like this option to click on add path variables, register path variables, then it will also work in normal command line on Windows, but it doesn't matter. You can just study Anaconda prompt. ASReview lab. So this is it. It's working. Oh, this is how we want to call it, tool for AI assisted. It just all sounded so terrible, basically. Yeah, so I'm gonna delete this. So I'm gonna do everything from beginning. So I hope it will work. Project name, so it makes sure that I don't delete things by accident. So this is the tool. This is how it works. I also wrote here some tips. Now what we are going to do, we're going to start a project. We are going to import this RIS or BibTeX file from Scopus into the ASReview. We are going to do the preliminary screening. It's I will show you in a minute. It's always very helpful if you already know some influential article you like. Otherwise, just use the random function. I'm going to put this article from this Thaler guy there because it might be interesting. Let's read the abstract. The two things I already told before. You decide when you stop reviewing. We usually stop after we get 20, 30, or 11 abstracts. You might say, but I want to review all the abstracts, but it's not a good strategy because you will still get tired and like this 5-10% error rate and so on. And you will never get you will never read everything, right? Like you will never basically read everything. You will never read all the papers like in the field basically. So I think there are enough justification to using this. And when we stop it, we will export the results and we will talk when we do it actually. So let's start a project. Everything here is being, did I say it? Everything here is being, saved automatically. Oh, I told it here. When you run close ASReview to run, simply start Anaconda, type ASReview lab. Web window will open. Everything in ASReview is being saved automatically on the go. You don't have to worry. I tried it. I'm not lying. When you are finished with working for the day or hour, you can just close both the web window and Anaconda prompt. It's all like, it's also gender, belief, experiment, literature review, sound. This is to screen. Just like myself in the loop and you can just copy the query here if you want, doesn't matter. So this is the tool, and now we will just start the setup. We are just going to file here Scopus RIS. Is it doing anything? Yes. So just drag and drop it here. All right, thank you. Yeah, I just renamed it, so that will be problematic if it didn't work. So gender belief Scopus, 967 documents, successful upload. So how this tool works, there are like many algorithms that you can choose from. The default algorithm is a Bayesian updating. So basically you get it some prior knowledge that we will get it right now. There's like an info here, and there's a help. Providing the prior knowledge gives the active learning model a head start, like a good start. Select at least one relevant and one irrelevant records. Relevant records can be found by searching for keywords, authors or titles. Irrelevant records can be drawn randomly from the data set. So if I don't know what I'm looking for, I will just look for random, but I sort of like this Thaler study, which I don't know what's gender differences in motivating reasoning. So when I'm telling you that the word belief, it's part of this motivated reasoning theory, doesn't really matter. Gender differences in motivated reasoning. Men and women systematically differ in their beliefs about their performance relative to others. In my article, men tend to be more confident. This paper provides support for an explanation for gender differences. Yeah. There is a name for motivated reasoning is a more like psychological term, and there is a there's a term in economics and I forgot it right now. Doesn't matter. So this is super relevant to what I want to do. Like beliefs distortion. It's called the beliefs distortion. This is what our colleague in Vienna is working on, the beliefs distortion. And it's the motivating reasoning. So if you are looking for beliefs distortion or motivating reasoning, you should already say like beliefs distortion or motivated reasoning, because some people use the same, that it means exactly the same. It's just in economics, we say beliefs distortion. So this is super relevant, right? Random. Communality is a nice but expandable trait in leaders. So I already don't understand what this means. Although leader role expectations appear to have become relatively more compatible with stereotypical I don't understand this paper, so I'm going to say it's not relevant. Yes. Factors affecting the human attribution of emotions toward animals. This is definitely not relevant, that I already see from the title. I don't want to like read the paper, read the abstracts here. The role of prior beliefs and expert testimony. Yeah, now I hope I don't have to read the abstracts here. Yeah, so anyway, the social geography of gender switching virtual environments on the internet. I don't know. Let's start. So this is the prior knowledge, enough prior knowledge, however, a bit more would help. This is like, this makes the initial training of the model, right? So this, if this was like a machine learning, this would be all that would happen. It was like, it would like do the selection, like the prediction, what's relevant for us and not, and it wouldn't be doing anything. But it's not classic machine learning. It's like this active learning where we are interacting with the machine, with the model. So now we are actually going to start a real review. So next. Classifier is naive bias, which is working on the Bayes rule. Feature extraction is it reads this model, it doesn't read papers, it doesn't read the text themselves, it only reads abstracts. The features have to be, the text has to be extracted and converted to numerical representations using something that's called feature extractions. There are two basic feature extractions, is TF, IDF, and I think back of words is also here. No, the Dr. Vec is here, doesn't really matter. Just go with defaults. Default is fine. You can use some other shallow, these all are by the way, something that's called shallow machine learning algorithms. So these are not neural networks. This is very basic machine learning. Naive bias is nice for this active learning because Bayesian updating. So like you have some prior belief about something, and then as a new evidence comes, it's updating the beliefs. It's very interesting for this application of this active learning and this interaction, because it, like every time you click, this is relevant, this is not relevant, it's going to update the beliefs and going to like guide you and give you more and more relevant papers. So this is like theoretically good. Finish. It's training. The model is training now. It can take some time. So I provided the model the initial data. So I said, provided a label, the target variable. I said, this is relevant, this is not relevant. And it already shows me that I reviewed already 0.4% of my total sample. Yeah, and this is it. And now we can just start reviewing. Yeah, and this is my description here. This is how we can download the results. And we will see some statistics. So I said, I randomly, I chose one paper I liked. I like the abstract. I didn't read the paper. I just discovered it a few minutes ago, as you saw. And I said from 4 papers, I said 1 is relevant, 3 are not. And this is how, this is important curve because it will show you how we are progressing. So it was the first, third, fourth paper. How we will be progressing. We will be coming from relevant to irrelevant. So it will be more and more of that. Yeah. And this is how many are like find relevant and how much should it be at random. So let's start reviewing. Does self-relevance. So as I told you, there will be only title and abstract, but there is also the DOI, which is a digital object identifier. So if you click on it, it's going to give you the, obviously it's going to give you the paper. Yeah, and I already see this like, oh, this is a good journal of economic behavior. So just don't click on it unless you are like super confused. Yeah, It's a little bit annoying that sometimes you can actually see the journal here, but most of the times not. Like you can, I mean, JBO, I know that JBO is Journal of Economic Behavior and Organizations, but if you don't know it depends on how the DOI is constructed. Information around. So like this is to check whether this is like really relevant or not. If you want to, you can just click through. Individuals are confronted with this. Where is the gender here? This is in contrast. It must have been in keywords, so it doesn't seem women are women, and he uses the word women, and in keywords I think he uses the keywords here. He uses the gender. I find that women may interpret positive feedback more because leading to more pessimistic posteriors, but it doesn't seem to be about gender, so we say it's irrelevant. Do overconfident workers cooperate less? Yeah. This might be interesting because overconfident men hold more post-optimistic beliefs. So I say this is relevant, and it's already learning. The model is learning. You see the progress. I found something that's relevant. Here I get like more relevant. Now I get irrelevant. So this is showing my progress. And how violations of gender stereotypes are evaluated. So I already see that this is a large body of research demonstrates that women encounter severe penalties for violating gender stereotypes. This is super interesting, relevant. Overconfidence. I would normally like obviously read the abstract, but we only have 1 more hour, so. Overconfidence, omens, and gender heterogeneity results from a field experiment. I like field experiments. We investigate superstitious based on the effect is heterogeneous according to gender. Just always like tempted to click on it, you know, to see on which journal. Don't do it, but oh, this is a good journal actually, I think. Okay. Now I'm doing what I shouldn't be doing, sorry. It's relevant. Competence and confusion. How stereotype threat can make you a bad judge of your competence. And you see, I'm suddenly starting to get very relevant things because this is obviously very relevant to what I do. How the women evaluate their own performance, how men evaluate the performance of women, which beliefs they held about the women's performance, because the study that we will be running is on actually this takeover experiment that like, if you see someone playing a game, you have a chance to take it over from them. And if you don't know the gender, then you're like, you don't know, right? And if you know that it's a man, and or if it's revealed that it's a woman, you are more likely to take it over from a woman than from a man, because like you update your beliefs like, oh, it's a woman and women are bad. You might have a belief that women are bad in this type of task and you take it over from them, but it's driven by the beliefs, because if you don't show them the belief, they wouldn't do it. So this is kind of stuff that we are interested in now, because this can explain a lot of this gender discrimination, basically, like this reasoning. So that's why I'm like only choosing articles that can add something to this. Competence and confusion. How stereotype threat can make you a bit judge of your own competence. This is interesting. Gender stereotype, and I mean, like, I will not be doing this till like evening. I don't think there are like 900 articles. So let's see how many are interesting here. Gender stereotypes still in mind. Information on relative preference and competition entry. I test whether the gender tournament gap diminishes in its size. Oh my God, I think I know who wrote this actually. Hence, individuals enter this interesting to be done by. Actually, this is like a low quality abstract, so I would say it's not really relevant. And what it's doing now in the background is that it's learning on the words, on the abstracts, and it's like comparing the features. So just like, oh, Marcel is interesting in like abstracts that are mentioning the lab or field experiments that are like written in this exact style, that are mentioning multiple studies. It's just like creating, like learning from the feature space. For women who heard a man state a positive stereotype, are more likely to be the result of them than women who heard stereotypes. Yeah. I have to be a little bit faster because there are like 50 relevant studies, then it starts to be irrelevant. And now everything, because it's learning in the background now, it's only gonna reshuffle everything. You see how I'm getting more and more relevant things, because they are giving me the articles that are similar. And they are not giving me articles anymore on how women and men perceive bats, as was one that I think second or third articles. Because if you remember in the beginning, I rated 4 articles in the preliminary assessment, and only 1 was relevant and 3 of them were irrelevant, and it's learning from it. Stereotype threat, oh, by the way, this doesn't replicate. It's, I don't think it exists. The stereotype threat, it's like a psychological behavioral economical theory that says that sometimes you are so scared that you will be like stereotypes, that you're like anxious and you perform bad, not because that stereotype is the truth, but you are scared that you will be stereotyped. So if you're like a person of color, for example, in the United States, then you would like perform bad, not because you were discriminated, I mean, also because you were discriminated, but because you are like, oh, like people of this color are like stereotyped at not having these high results on this SAT test and so on. So like, but it doesn't replicate. So there is something else in a playing effect, right? So I like this DOI because I don't see which journal is it, I can guess it. Chores have been stereotypically gendered feminine in many national contexts. I don't care. It's irrelevant. I don't care about course. How is that pronounced? Do casual gaming environments evoke stereotype threat, examining the effects of explicit priming and avatar gender? Yeah, and this is not relevant to me because it's gaming and stereotype threat. So I'm gonna say it's not relevant, and the model is gonna learn that it's not relevant, and it's gonna put these stereotype threats to the back of the queue of the workload. Arts versus sciences, academic background, like activate gender stereotypes, there's ongoing whether innate cognitive sex differences contribute to the underrepresentation of women. This seems to be a little bit misogynistic article, the way it's written. But we are interested, let's say. System justifying behaviors when feeling dependent on a system triggers gender stereotype. And you see, I said I'm interested in these academic things, and it already gave me this another academic study based on system justification theory. In this research, system justification motivation was triggered. I don't understand it, so it's not relevant. There is a lot of research on spatial performance, and it means how well can you like orient yourself in the space, like not space, like out of the planet, but like in, I think it's like, I guess, like, can you like rotate things in your mind and so on? Yeah, and I don't care about this spatial performance in this research. I say it's not relevant. Competence beliefs. This is what we need. That's what we are interested in. Relevant. Lay beliefs about gender and sexual behavior. This is not interesting. Males always better than females in mental rotation. Not exploring and gender belief in explanation. I don't care about mental rotation task. It's a task in this spatial orientation. I don't care. Oh, this is interesting study actually. I would be like miss, but it's like a narrative study basically. It's not. The study shows that the empirical results of size effects are mixed, and in addition, I'm not sure. Let's say it's relevant. Effects, I don't care about the mental rotation, and it should learn from it already. Irrelevant. Yeah, this is not too relevant. The stereotype threat. Examining the content and stereotype threat effect of female language stereotypes. We are not interested. Communicating gender equality progress uses social interest for women considering. This might be interesting. Focusing on gender similarities increases family. You see, I'm already having a drop. I only reviewed like 25 studies, and I'm already dropping down. So the number of studies that are actually explicitly mentioning beliefs, I think I already reviewed all. Even though I searched for them, I searched for the belief studies in the queries. So all of them should be about beliefs, but the one that I'm explicitly interested, I think we're already here in the beginning. Focusing on gender similarities might be interesting. Reactions to gender equality in men. No, this is definitely not interesting from the title. No. not the science nerd. And now all of these like are gonna be about the STEM. And I'm saying gender stereotypes and to social roles. Yeah. Exposure to sexism can decrease implicit gender stereotype bias. Basically, what I'm getting is irrelevant. Wasn't he here already? Yeah. I mean, this is a special case here because the beliefs about gender are like not like this type of literature I'm looking for, like this beliefs about competence, as I said in the beginning, because I learned that I'm interested in this competence and so on. There are not that many papers on it about it would be in this like method, that would be using this method and style that I'm interested in. So it's like, I don't think we are going to get anything relevant actually anymore, but let's see. I told you that when we are like getting like 20 or 30 irrelevant abstracts, we usually stop. Yeah, this is not interesting. Yeah, this is not interesting. I think, yeah, I just screened 39 abstracts and I already found what I was looking for. So irrelevant. This is super irrelevant. Yeah, irrelevant. Power of like the gender status and agency and performance evaluation. Yeah, we don't do language studies here. This is something I do, but in natural language processing, but we don't do it here. Transfer bias in frontline organization, but imperfection about the underlying causal logics. Transparency. No, it doesn't seem. Oh, it's implicit association test, but it doesn't really work. It has been debunked. Let's say we would like to review this one. Not interested. Not interested. Not at all interested. STEM. A fixed mindset about ability undermine. I think the Lehman sisters hypothesis. Yeah. This might be an interesting review. Implication of exposure to neuroscience research for gender essentialist beliefs. Yeah, not interested. Gender differences in behavior and function experimental analysis, because yeah, this is not what we are about. Yeah, doing gender differently, partner violence beliefs. Maybe issues relatable. Yeah, you see, like I was like having some relevant abstracts, then I had like 5 abstracts that were not relevant, and I had like a small drop. So I reviewed the literature on this finance things. I found a little bit of relevant articles. This is not relevant. When I'm gonna have 20 irrelevant abstracts, I'm just gonna stop. In a row, if I have 20 irrelevant abstracts in a row, I'm just gonna stop. Trials of women leaders in the workforce, that's interesting. Femininity, money, incongruity, doesn't make sense. Low variability in female students. I mean, obviously, it's not, I mean, what I'm saying is not interesting for our research question. Part. Might be a little bit interesting. The influence of student ethnicity on teacher expectations. Yeah, restoring trust in the promise. Gender comparison and responsiveness to others' evaluations and achievement settings. What's stopping you? Their social behavior and gender. We find that social framing tends to enforce by social behavior in women, but not men. No. Based on the effect of subtle religious representation and cooperation, expectancy bias and behavioral observations. It's obviously when you really read the abstracts and you decide I can't do it here because we don't have that enough time, it would be even like better. Like it would train better, and I'm just like It would be even more efficient. Expectancy bias and experimental analysis of treatment of X is not interesting. Female leaders and the response, sex bias. Like, let's review 5 more abstracts, but what was highly relevant was here in the beginning. It was reshuffled to the beginning. Then we had these 2 small islands. When I found something that's maybe a little bit interesting, I don't think we are going to have anything interesting. Of mice and men, moral judgment might be interesting for some other research, but not for this one. For sociality model, race differences, does school learning shape gender ideology, gender and venture capital decision making. Might be interesting for this venture capital paper. Corruption we are not studying here. I think this is like cultural thing. Yeah. The effects of gender neuroassociation doesn't make any sense. So I read it, you see here since last relevant, I read it screen. I told you I'm gonna stop when I make like 20 irrelevant abstracts. So I already had like 18 abstracts were like last relevant. So let me see, this is not beliefs about gender. It actually seems to be sort of relevant. Yeah, this is not relevant. So now I'm like back here. So now I need another like 20 irrelevant abstracts to finally stop. Experimental evidence suggests that some people dislike telling lies. Do economists lie more? That's interesting. Irrelevant. Individual differences, gender role beliefs. They don't want a special ability. Do stereotypes strike twice? Self-stereotyping as a route to system justification. Protecting manhood. Error-related negativity varies with the activation of gender stereotypes. Exposure to benevolent sexism, not interesting. Facts and artifacts in research. Gender norms and beliefs and men as violence against, no Bangladesh. Beliefs about managed emotions. Sports we don't want. Discrimination from below. No, we don't want substance abuse. But for men. Campaign, status beliefs. Mentoring information and natural use. Yes, I'm literally getting like irrelevant things right now. Stereotypes and tournament subselection. No, this is boring. Crime and prejudice. No priming. Generalized trust and experimental approach to interpersonal trust. Irrelevant. Yeah, and that's it basically. Like you see that I was only clicking on relevant abstracts basically in the beginning, so it successfully reshuffled all the workload. Then we had like few of these islands. If I continue going on, it's going to be just like, this is completely irrelevant to me, like romantic partners, to my research, to our research, social context. From automatic anti-gay prejudice behavior, that's not about gender competencies. So so that's what we did. That we like screened 12% of publications, and we basically most likely we found almost everything we could. So we say we didn't have to like screen 88% more. Yeah. You see, it's just all just like completely irrelevant. Now I only found actually the 16 articles here that are interesting for me. So I can basically stop reviewing. There's also review history, so you can like go at it and look what you like. There is this hard, what you didn't like, there is this cross. Yeah, you can like start this dark mode if you want to review in it. And that's it basically. So like I can just stop it now. So I'm gonna go home. Total reviewed, I reviewed 122 abstracts, which amounts to almost 13% of all abstracts. You see this like it's a concave function. So first I was finding a lot of relevant abstracts, and then I was like plateauing. So it's like went to plateaus, like very low. It was like a very slow amount of abstracts were added. And in the end, I found only 16 relevant abstracts. So what can I do now is that I mark screening as finished. And I can just download the results. So I usually like to only, so what do I do now in the Prisma? I'm gonna write the data collection process. I'm gonna put in the diagram generator. I'm gonna write after title abstract screening, how many of them were actually, so from 967, we actually went to 16. We will just write it to your, we'll just write it here, report screen, and we're now 16 at this like example. So reports excluded are 967 minus 16, which is 951. You would say that you would put this, you would say that numbers that were excluded by the automatic tool were like this 951. Yeah, there's one doing a little bit of noise. Good. And now we can just download the results. Yes. We will follow the appropriate part of this Prisma checklist and work all after these steps. We stop reviewing, we export the results in CSV and Excel, and we also export our project. It's for the safety reason if something happens to our computer, because it's like stored locally, and because when we will send this literature review paper, we will select any paper that uses this tool, we will attach it to the submission of the paper, we will put it somewhere. So we we use this like a transparent tool that help us screen the abstracts. Yeah. And just download it here. Yes. Show in Finder. Just gonna put it to my folder. Here I'm gonna, so this is how I export the papers, and I can also export the project here. And that's it basically, and we are finished. It took like not too long. Yeah. And there is this is the result from the gender review. And what it shows you here is, so there's a title of the paper, and it just shows you how we were going through. So it's the gender differences in motivated reasoning, do confident workers cooperate less. Now it also shows you the journals. So like, because you are after this sort of bias thingy, I can get rid of this. Let me get rid of the, it also includes the abstract. So you can also read it again in your Excel file. It has some notes, like how many times it has been cited and so on. It's not that interesting. Scopus, there is a link to it. And this is included, which means that these first 16, when there is one, it means yes, it was included. So these 16 papers are the ones that I like. And the rest of them, they have nothing because they are 0. So I didn't like it. And this is basically it. So now you have this table, and now you have a little bit of time still, so I can talk about this other step. So we move around, now we are moving from the screening step to the step where we actually have to read the papers and extract the knowledge and decide whether we will finally include these papers or not. So, and you see if like you look at this, like the papers I liked are coming from like a high profile journals, actually, even though I didn't know it. So it's JBO, again, American Economic Review, and so on. Yeah, this was just interesting and so on. And which is a coincidence. This is feminist economics. So what I do, like, I should like keep this for the, I should keep this table and like complete it to my submission to the journal to show them like, hey, we searched these papers and only these of them were actually relevant for us. So then we stop the reviewing, and you can reproduce it using our project. Okay, copy it here. Something with my, doesn't really, Okay, whatever, doesn't matter. So let me just do the, so I should like save one copy of it, and then what I'm gonna do is just like gonna delete all these papers that are not interesting. Because if I look at the in the front, in the back, what's like not interesting for me at all, it's like these medical students, affirmative consent, women's risk taking in game community, because I said irrelevant so many times that it just put it to the back of the workload. Yeah. So I'm just gonna delete it here, like for the purpose of this workshop. And this is what I basically just have to read. Then I'm gonna make a final decision. So first I wrote here as an instruction, I wrote here, what do I add here? So after this screening phase, fill the Prisma checklist, export everything. Now we are going to assess the papers for eligibility, which I'm going to do here because I can read 16 papers here. Provide reasons for rejections at this stage. So we have this Excel file that was exported from ASReview, skim through the papers, put a column with notes on why the papers were rejected at this stage. We should like provide some reasoning at this stage. This very much depends on your research question. Simple table with accepted and rejected papers and notes on rejection will go to the appendix of your paper. For example, in our venture capital review, we were only interested in studies that used counterfactual methodology. I talked about it before. For each rejected paper, we then wrote no counterfactuals. In our gender studies, we only included studies that specifically dealt with a concept of belief. So here I say like a note, or I can say decision, yes, why, yes, yes, why, yes, yes, why, yes, yes. And there's this one that's not that interesting, maybe as versus science, gender stereotypes. So I say no, and if I say no, I should provide a note. And this I will also send to the review, and I will make it publicly available for everyone who is interested in my literature review. It's like I can write it reason for rejection. And I will say no beliefs, for example. Like it depends on your research question. You just like alright. Not working here. I don't know why. I say this all is irrelevant after this eligibility criteria. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna like put this here. This Mac. Touching my computer. Oh. So I don't need. And I can say this is the, so I can also name this to just still be like super systematic. This is the phase 3. I can say this is the phase 3, right? So let's say this is a stage 3. So it's called eligibility. So, and I put this no, not eligible thing to the bottom. So it's like easier for me to read it. What I'm gonna do now, I'm just gonna like copy this. And I'm gonna make the stage 4, which is the list of final inclusion papers, stage 4, final inclusion. And here I'm just gonna copy the papers that actually I said why. And I told you that we are like, so we move from the step 3 to step 4. So now I again have to go to this Prisma diagram generator. And this is the number of articles excluded after full text screen is 1. Provide reason for rejection. I will say no beliefs about competence. And if I have like multiple reasons and there are so like 3 studies for like 1 study, if I had like more excluded studies, like 3 studies, I have 6 excluded studies. I don't know. No experimental, like I said, no control group. For example, I'm just like making things up now. Control group. It's like out of these 6 studies, like 5 of them also didn't have the control group. So I would fill it and I can go then this last step 4, and this is this final inclusion table, which I already created here. You see, I like name it here. And this is when I told you in this workshop that like the final stage is that we will be extracting knowledge into columns. So the columns that we will use, like to extract the knowledge from the papers, we will like read at this stage 3 when you are reading the paper. So like I obviously couldn't read it here, but in this stage 3, I should read obviously all of these papers, but I know that one of them is like maybe not that relevant. So I just wrote it here for the purpose of workshop, but I already like skimmed through them at this point, but I only like extract the knowledge from the papers at this final point. And I will show you some like 2 examples. One, as I promised, there is a table for empirical work and for data work, and there is a table for experimental work. Seems to be highly beneficial to create these tables, include them in the reviews. Also for your own, it's good because when you read the papers, you might have a feeling that you know it, you understand it, and you will never forget it, but obviously you forget it the week afterwards. So it's also, I also use it for my own, just like orienteer myself better in the research. And the columns that you will use, basically the variables you will fill in for every papers, like you can vary, it depends on your research scope. Usually more is better than less, like you can always like condense it back. I will show the example in a minute. One of the columns that we might use is in many domains it might be beneficial to have a column title that I only started using recently. Is a column titled open questions, like where you can write what the paper outlines as future avenues for research. This might be also beneficial for your future research, so you know what to work on, but also a good part of the literature review should include this part on like what the studies didn't answer yet. Yeah. So then I will say that like I will show in this venture capital paper that it should be, the table basically should be in the body of the text, because I think it's basically the most valuable part of the paper usually. But let me show some examples now. So I'm not going to fill the table here right now, but I'm going to show you the table that mostly Nicola did, and me also a little bit. So these are the articles that we got from one of our, these are like, that we got from the similar screening as we did here. Okay, this is not it. It's the one that's linked here. If you click here on the experimental, it's gonna give you the gender beliefs table. Example table, gender experiment. Yeah, so you see that in this, we were also searching for a little bit different terms than ours today, because we also wanted a little bit of this LGBT things included, and I just like cut a little bit of it. So these are the papers that were deemed like interesting, basically from this ASReview on like this similar gender topic. And this is so I basically, so now this is extracting the knowledge from the paper, and I basically divide it into these parts. So this is the paper identifiers. These are the basic identifiers about the paper. So you have the year, study title, authors, journal that's from. So you can also, in the end, you can like count the journals. You can like make a simple reference like this. Most articles came from Journal of, I don't know, Feminist Economics here, I guess. Yeah. And then this is where now, so these are the paper identifiers. And now this is the knowledge extraction thingy. So what you might be interested in experimental things are characteristics. Is basically what's the treatment effect, because in experiments you have the experimental and treatment condition. So treatment is something you do and you don't do in the control conditions. So for example, in this study, so Nicola just went through the paper. In this study, it's the revelation of gender, photo of the partner, or here in case not completely finished this table, but the other one I will show you is finished. Photo of the partner, whether it's a lab or field, what's the outcome. And so this is the sample and treatment. This is the most important. So you see here, the treatment is framing, that you will frame people in treatment conditions. And the sample was 182 subjects, which I already see is underpowered. And it has been done in lab. And so this is the sample and treatment. This is super interesting for experimental economists to read this first. And then you have the model specification that we use to, that we like learn more about the research outcome variables, the perception of others, risk attitude, stereotype, threat, the statistical methods they use, whether they use like regression or they use only t-test, and so on. And findings. Findings are very important. It's like beliefs about both oneself and others to come from two sources. Women are less likely to engage in costly punishment of corruption. Female are less risk-seeking than males and females, and so on. And then you have this final decision whether it's relevant or not. And this is the study where we didn't have two reviewers. So this is the experimental thing. But let me show you the work that's sort of more finished, and it's this venture capital work. Okay, and so if you go here, if you go to the empirical table, so this is the table that you will basically find here in this paper. This venture capital and growth of young high-tech firms in the EU, systematic review of the empirical evidence. We also said which journals then the final papers were published in these journals. We screened it before. This is basically, just want to show you the result. This is the table one, because it's not that it's not in the appendix, but it's because some journals want you to have tables and graphs like separated. And this is the table that we had in Excel, and it's here. If you click on it, and here, what's interesting is here is that we did it in multiple stages. So in first stage, we were always like two reviewers, and we were all these we randomize who is going to be responsible person for this paper and for the other paper. We read the titles, authors, we read the papers, and we extracted all this knowledge. So this is the paper identifiers, and we extracted. So I would have to freeze this one, but there's like a early stage financing and firm growth in new industries. So we were like, if we found it by reference, it's by firm. Which country is this? It's in Germany. 1997 is the period in empirical studies that's very important. To 2002, what's the treatment? Venture capital, what is the characteristic? It's VC funding, VC investment. What's the sample? 340 firms listed on Deutsche stock market. If it's coming from some underlying data set like RITA, SABE, or venture economics, you would say that. Then you have and these are like the sample and treatment effects. Then you have the model specification. So here you would have here, this is super important in empirical studies. So it's like what you actually what this paper is actually estimating. So you know that this paper is estimating growth, profitability, stock market performance. Then you want to know what's the control variable, what they control for. So you usually want them to control for many things that could be confounders that could confound the results. So many of them this is what you like to see. You like to see to be control size of firm, sector, industry, age, profitability. So you write it there. Just really go through the model and try to decipher what they are doing. And then you write in all the empirical methods they use. So for example, this one uses on the OLS. So you would basically say that it's not relevant because it doesn't use the counterfactual methods. But for example, we excluded this study, and you have the empirical methods. You have the findings, positive effect on revenue growth, the new relationship for scale-ups. So the paper looked good, but because we had this requirement that we only will consider, so it's like model specification part, and there is this findings, ratings, comments. It's not interesting. This previous minute rating, this was before the ASReview. We would just say it's not relevant because there are no counterfactual methods. So you would just do this and we randomize it with this Shmaranda Pantea, maybe this Natalia. So which means that I would do advanced stage, I would do this paper, and then at the second stage, someone else would do the same paper. So for example, in this stage, this 2008 article, Natalia reviewed and extracted the knowledge. Our venture capitalist as catalyst for innovation. And in second stage, Shmaranda would review the knowledge, would extract the knowledge. So this is super robust because you have to fill in all these things and have the new variable rating, relevant or not. And then what we did here is that we compared it. We did a comparison. So like, our venture capital is a catalyst for innovation. So I would copy the things from, I've copied the things from the second stage only, actually. But I just like said verbal rate. I was just comparing the verbal ratings when it was relevant and irrelevant, and these things were the same from the stage 1 and stage 2, even though there were different reviewers. I would say, okay, final decision is relevant, comparison, final comment. If there was something to comment on, is like was the responsible person at the first stage, who was the responsible person in the second stage. This is important in the sense that like if you are going to publish this table, which you should, inside your literature review, you would want to be sure that what we are saying to the people is true. So you don't want to say like that the sample is 2000 to 2015 when it's only 2012 to 2015, for example. It's obvious that this is like more tiring, but if you have, I mean, like if you have 16 or 50 papers, you can do this. If you have 960 papers, it would be much more difficult, obviously. So, and this is it basically. So this is what, so I just did it, and just like when it was fine, when there was an issue, I just notified it. And when there was a final discussion, final check, they just like reviewed after the second stage by Marcel, said it's issue. When we discussed it, maybe on Skype, we said it's fine, and so on, yeah. And then I just basically, after this stage, I created this final list of tables that were included in this, and this is basically the stage. This is basically this finish of the stage 4. This is the final list of papers. So you see that from even before we didn't have this ASReview in this table, but I think the table is nice. That's why I want to share it with you. We only ended up with 25 studies that were actually relevant. Yeah. And it's basically it. So you can go through the tables. They are nice, I think. And that's what we did here. So that's what we did here is that like basically the table is central part. So we don't use the titles here because it would be too long, but it's this study, it's a citation, country of analysis, Germany, period. We only pick the most important things for the paper. So whether it's individual venture capital, corporate venture capital, table 1 is sorted in order of studies. Abbreviations stand for, these are the methods, PSM, propensity score matching, GMM, generalized method of moments, FE, fixed effects regression. And that's interesting, for example, if you want to compare, like if the studies that use matching, if they over-report the effects, if the effects are on average higher compared to the studies that use the general methods of moments and so on. And basically only when we had this table and we were sure what we are reviewing, basically on this knowledge that we got and summarized in the table, like we started basically writing the paper. That's how the paper was basically written. And like, you know how it is, like there are too many papers being published. No, many people don't really read the papers, you just skim through it. So if you provide people a knowledge that it's condensed and obviously have the main results, it's the most important part of the citation, of the reviewed paper. If you provide people knowledge in this very condensed form, they can just like look through. It's also a higher chance that your paper will get cited, people will use it, and so on. Because sometimes reading the reviews is like very time consuming and so on. That's basically, I would say, like the most important message actually of this workshop. Because so one of my colleagues in Vienna, he's just trying to do he's doing the effects of venture capital, but he's using like that. He's sort of new to it. It's also not my field like that mainly, but he's using some text analysis. He's trying to find like these venture capital, these startups that are getting this venture capital. He's looking whether this venture capital actually increases the amount of patents, but like he's trying to sort of like proxy for the quality of the patent by like looking through what the company writes about the patent and so on. He obviously doesn't like have time to read like hundreds of papers. And I told him like, yeah, but I have this review, and there's just like this table that you can look through. And if you see that the main results is that that there are positive effects on investment for both IVC and CVC, but only IVC has negative effect. And maybe it's interesting for him. And this is like good, this doesn't have so many companies actually like covered, but if he likes it, so he can look at it. And then I met him after a few weeks, and he was so happy that actually he got this table, because he's just like, and he read the text a bit. that he just like could navigate himself in the table. And it's because sometimes in the reviews you would have like citations. They would say Engel and Elbaek and also Colombo and Grillet 2010 found that there is a positive effect on employment and sales growth. But at the same time, Beneder found in Austria that positive effects, that there's an insignificant effect on innovation, which doesn't really tell you much. Like, it tells you it's interesting when you read it, but if you really need to go for it, or you want to assess the study, you would need to like find the citation, download the paper and read it. So I think this table like basically provides you more information without necessarily looking into the paper. Yeah, and I guess that's basically what I want. This is the search code that we use. This super complicated one. It wasn't super complicated, but it wasn't exactly easy. So that's what I would say. This is basically what you can finish the paper with. You can get inspired by these like columns that we wrote there. They basically cover like most of these studies that are using any form of data. I would suggest to use this open question column. I would suggest that the table with extracted knowledge should ideally be in body of your text after you have it finished. And then only after you have the final table finished, you can start writing the paper about it. In my humble opinion, the paper is the most valuable. The table is the most valuable. The table is the most valuable part of the paper, I would say, because that's what I do. I mean, honestly, I just like skim through the literature reviews. I'm looking if there is like something I can read through, like some table analysis, like look for something, some summarizations and so on, because I don't want to read like 40 pages long literature review. Yeah. So the last step after you do all these first steps, every time you would just fill this Prisma checklist and workflow. What you would do, you would include the workflow, you would include the checklist, you would export the project so it's transparent. You would try to sell this using this ASReview. You would try to sell it in your paper. Like you would say, like, we use this transparent review. Everything is documented. We have this Prisma diagram, so we are as systematic as possible. We summarize the knowledge in the table, and that's basically how we would try to sell the paper. And you could also say that, like, thanks to this tool, we were much less prone to biases. That's basically it. And I think when you have all this finished, like you have all the tables and everything, then I just wrote some tips on writing. Table is a central part of your paper, in my opinion. It gives it extra value. It's very easy and fast to read this knowledge from table. Many people will only read the table. Tips for writing cluster papers. What you usually get is find some similarities about the papers and like cluster papers into topics they'll deal with and other methods they use depending on the context, what you are interested in. You should like write one longer paragraph per cluster. Like look what's similar, by what are some papers similar and by what are they similar. So for example, in this venture capital, some papers are similar in the sense that they study university startups. Some papers are similar in the sense that they use they are studying like the debt financing or the collateral financing and so on. So, and this is very easy to see from this table, but if you would just like write one paragraph per paper and you wouldn't have this knowledge summarized and extracted into tables, you wouldn't see these patterns, you wouldn't be able to basically like cluster things, because you would just be lost. Yeah. What's super important in literature reviews, because the literature reviews are not just like, okay, like so much research was done, so there must be the truth, so we are going to like all summarize it. But the literature reviews should also definitely summarize the ongoing work. And I mean, like, to be honest, we don't know that much about Walt, right? And so it's obvious that you should never write it like in the sense that like there has been so much research done, it's like finished, we are just like closing this research. But always like look for, because many people will read the literature review looking for these tips, what to research next, what are the open questions. So I would definitely like suggest you to discuss the evidence brought by the papers overall, discuss the limitations of groups of different papers, of the groups of them. So for example, we would say like these many papers didn't use the proper counterfactual methodology. Or now I would say, another thing I can talk about is this propensity score matching, which was a thing which is heavily used and I hope I will not like insult anyone right now, because I also didn't know it, but it's the matching first step, propensity score matching, then like OLSFE. Propensity score matching has been debunked. It most likely doesn't work. By propensity scores, and I only know it from spring, so I didn't know it when I was actually like working on this. My propensity scores should not be used for matching. This Harvard paper from 2019, so it's already been cited around 970 people. And the propensity score matching is an empirical method that's trying to look for like the empirical counterparts in the data. So it's simulating the experiment, the laboratory experiment on empirical data. It's connected to what I said before, that like you can observe people, like the people or companies in two states at the same time, but you can use something that's called a counterfactual model and so on. But for a long time, this propensity score matching was used to basically match people who are so similar, or companies that are so similar to each other, but one of them got COVID, or only one of these twins, statistical twins, the people who are almost same age, live in the same location, just like this is the propensity to get the treatment, but only one of them got it. So you could say we reduce the bias, the self-selection bias, the endogeneity by using this matching, because we match people, and we could say that in these matches, people were so similar that they had almost the same probability to get COVID, for example, that's my other paper, or to receive the venture capital funding, but one of them got it and one didn't. And we could say it was almost by accident. So it was like completely randomized. So what you could write now is that these propensity scores that were used for, there is this very, very strong evidence. This is, they say it's an anomaly proper method and so on. The problem is that it's like blind to, like there was a problem with the imbalance and so on, doesn't matter. The problem is that it has been shown in this article in 2019 that it converges if you match on more than two things, it converges to random matching. PSM approximates random matching, so that doesn't work. Okay, so this method, so many papers, basically most of these papers use matching. There is an evidence that it doesn't work. And I hope I'm not gonna make anyone angry right now. And what should you use? There is a solution to it. There is a CEM, it's called coerced exact matching. So you don't match like one-to-one, you don't match the people, but you have these groups of people you match with, and it's been shown even mathematically that this doesn't converge to random matching, and it works. So this would be, if you want to use matching, don't use propensity scores basically anymore, use the coerced exact matching. So this is the kind of thing I would, for example, write in this literature review now. And you see this PSM matching, PSM, and so on. Yeah, there's a lot of controversy about this and so on, but it's so this is, for example, limitations that you could discuss. The most important part of the paper is a section, and if you have this table, summarized knowledge, you have these limitations. Then I would say basically the other super most important part is the section that I call, where do we go from here? So like, so what? So what are you gonna do now? And there you should like, in this, here you should be really creative, but also like it should be doable, like what you suggest to do. So for example, for this, I showed you this meta-analysis on this CEO narcissism research, and you would say that there you would say like, where do we go from now? It's very easy because we don't have measures we don't really have like unobtrusive measures how to measure narcissism of CEOs, because we can't really get to them. So what should we do now is that we should do natural language processing and look how CEOs talk and try to train the models to detect narcissism in people and like extrapolate it to them. So that's basically what I would suggest in this narcissism research. In upper echelon theory, you would say, on this other review, you would say, we need to create a theoretical model of how this all works, because it's like spurious correlation basically. Here I would say, where do we go from here? We have to recompute everything with coerced exact matching to show that our results are robust, and so on. Yeah, this right, yeah, basically. And so that's basically how you can read this paper. There is like, it's also written in abstract. This should be part of the abstract, which says there's supporting evidence for two main channels highlighted by literature: provision of financial resources and non-financial resources. although the evidence in letter is scarce, so we don't really know in non-financial resources. And there is this part on gap, policy implications. Yeah, the results indicate the need for policy support for venture capital. So if you have an empirical paper or maybe some experimental paper, that depends. It's like drawing policy implications for experimental papers is really difficult. But yeah, so you should also have this part, where do we go from now? What are the policy implications? But I would say that this where do we go from now is the most important, because it should like set you which questions have been already answered and which questions haven't been answered. So for example, if you're interested in marketing, you can go to, this is this marketing institute. I spent some time, a few months on questions. So they basically publish, which is super nice. Like will be open question. Basically, they publish like this. Yeah. So I think a marketing institute. Basically, they did the literature review of all literature in marketing, basically, and I can't really find it. Yeah, I'm so sorry, I can't find it right now. But what they published, this marketing news published, they published. They basically published. They basically published like a review and like which areas have been already answered and where in which areas we don't have so much domain knowledge and we should do. So this kind of literature reviews are the best, where like where like you really like review what has been done in this domain and what has been not, and like gives you suggestions and so on. So that's I guess is how I would like to conclude this workshop in the end. Yeah, our materials are on the website. So you can just play with it. You can, I hope it will be useful for you in the end. I made these instructions, so you can just like always go to them. You can use this Prisma framework. Just make sure to like document everything and do this checklist. Yeah, play with the ASReview. Yeah, and I guess that's all from my side. So I hope there are still some people left. And thank you so much for your attention. I'm definitely open to all the questions that you might have. I guess it was exhausting, right? It's like almost 3 hours. I always say, when I start my presentation, I always say like, this might be really short today. And it never is, so I didn't say it today, and it was a good thing to do. Yeah.
I read in the chat that Shimon has had a good question, so maybe if he's here, he could pose it again. It's about duplicates and how you approach when you want to add something new to the project. So he can ask it.
Sure. Thank you. There was this discussion in the chat, like with Wojciech's father, that the idea is that you train the function, and later when new papers are published, you can load them in and review them with the same function, right? With like the already trained algorithm. So my question was, how does this work with like duplicates? If I do the search again, upload a new file, does it really process it and not ask me about the same abstracts again, or how does this work?
Yes, there is a yes. It's just also it wasn't like duplicates of papers, but better if you import it again. If it's gonna be like a complete project, yeah, it's a complete project. It's not gonna ask you again to rate it. You can try it. If that was the question, if it's not gonna ask you again, yeah, so I exported it already. So let's go home. Yeah, sorry, I can't watch this chat because I don't have two screens, and It's just to
Yeah, sure.
yeah. So let's import.
I think the idea is that I have already the
Import
project.
import project, and it's gonna be the same when I import it. Yeah. So it's gonna be like when I import it again, it's gonna be like I'm gonna download results, and it's gonna tell you what we did all the time. And yes.
And can I upload more data, more papers to the already running project?
No.
No, unfortunately not.
No.
Okay.
It's like finite. It's like this has to be set. That's why we put so many papers in the beginning to make sure.
Okay, so I have to make sure that the first file is like complete. Everything I want to review is in the first file I upload.
Yes, but I mean, you can always rate it again, but you can always do the same process again, and so it doesn't take that much time because it's really faster than if you would. But that's why I put the keywords that were really general, to make sure that I include whatever I can. Yeah.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Thank you. Oh, I think it only looks like there are only 5 people, but I think I only see the people with cameras, so whatever. I tried this. Yeah, whatever. Meeting control. I can't see it. Whatever. I am trying to see this chat and fix it. Thanks. The meta-analysis much as blah, blah, blah. Oh, I might also ask non-use of the citation graph.
Yeah, so that's me. So actually, if I can spend just 1 or 2 more minutes, I'm responsible for the PhD school in informatics here. So I'm a bit also to talk something which I talked about with informatics PhD students. The typical process we use, or many of us use, is tracking the backward citations. Like I pick up, I think it's related to the method centricity of informatics, while you really focus on the results on empirical data, which are independent rather of the method, right? But when you have evolving methods, it's quite a nice approach, in my opinion, just to pick up a limited number of important influential papers from the past, and then track the citations, and then you have a very good chance you get all or most relevant papers, even the recent ones. So it's quite another avenue of doing literature search in for whatever kind of publications.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that I wanted to put it in here, and then I was like, I don't really use these citation grids, but I saw it and it's great. And Nicola, is Nicola here? Nicola uses it a lot. Is it helpful, Nicola, in our fields? She's still here? Okay. If you are tracking evolution of the method and the contributions and not the empirical, because for example, in empirical fields that I'm usually in, like the results also change over time. So that's why it's really hard to track the evolution, but the citation graphs are a really good idea. Thank you so much for it. And there is a software for it. I think you can do it in R, definitely, and Python, but I think there is like a standalone software that you can use in citation graphs also. Yes, I would definitely encourage everyone to join, to look for it. Yeah.
The software is called Research Rabbit.
Research Rabbit. Nice. The most powerful discovery app ever built for research. Nice.
Actually, there are many kinds of such tools, but the problem is of many of them is limited coverage. That's why I normally rely on Google Scholar, because Google Scholar has a really huge coverage, including a lot of say non-scientific or not very good quality papers. But if you use this highly cited papers and follow the graphs of which papers get highly cited, and you have a pretty good coverage. I also tried a couple of these say smarter interfaces, but the problem is really that Google say downloads all kind of stuff which other tools typically don't have access to.
Thank you so much. I love these insights from informatics, because I don't have that big domain knowledge. Yeah. I mean, in the field of natural language processing, there's not that much evolution being done. I mean, there is more evolution. There's like word embeddings, Glow, and now they have these these GPD and so on. So yeah, I don't do research in ID. But so thank you so much. This was yeah, it's the I see some discussion here on recall and precision, I guess. Yeah. So yeah. So thank you all so much. Thank you so much. And have a good day. Have a good lunch. And have a good rest of the day. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Marcel. It was great. It was a great workshop, really helpful.
Thank you. Goodbye.
We will
And thank you all for all the chat and all the discussion. I really loved it. And I see the chat is so full. And it was really nice. Thank you. I really enjoyed it. And I'm also glad for lunch.
Thanks, Marcel.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.